Hi y'all, welcome to my shop. I was just working on making some knobs with a screw chuck. In the last video I showed you how to use a woodworm screw. If you didn't get a chance to watch that, here's the link. You can click on it and open it up in a new window. But what if you don't have a scroll chuck, which is required for that woodworm screw? Well, I'm going to show you how to use make and use a screw chuck, because some projects might just be too large for a scroll chuck. For a woodworm screw. So let's get started. There are three approaches that are all somewhat similar depending on your purpose and whether you already have a scroll chuck. Let me show you some examples. The first and most obvious is mounting a scrap of wood on a faceplate, similar to this. Another example is use a threaded glue block like this and then glue a piece onto it, and that's what we're going to use to demonstrate how to do it. And then, of course, lastly, if you do have a scroll chuck, you can always take you a spindle scrap and turn it, especially for smaller projects. Side grain works best, but end grain would be okay for very small projects, especially thicker blocks like this where you have a lot of threads mounted in that screw. That's or a little smaller one for little tiny projects, or mounting for smaller screws for small knobs. That can work as well. So now let's look at some different size screws you might consider. If you're turning knobs, you typically want to use the same size screw that you'll use for mounting the knobs. Otherwise, a number 10 screw will work. If you need something a little larger, number 12. And these are sheet metal screws. It gives you some idea for scale. For larger work, though, you might want to consider lag screws. Here's a 1/4 inch, here's a 5/16, and if you're turning something larger, closer to like smaller bowls, you might even want to go up to a 3/8 of an inch. You may want to make them slightly longer than this, but it really depends on what size wood blank you're putting them in. If you're putting them in a 3/4 inch stock, these will probably work fine. I think these are 1.5 inches, but if you're making something with a 3/8 inch or even 5/16, you probably want a larger block of wood to give it more threads in there to give it a better holding power. Okay, let me show you how I drill a hole. I'm going to use the most basic option. That's the one using a faceplate, since everybody's got one. And you screw on a cross grain face grain piece of wood. Like I say, that's the strongest, so just get you a kiln-dried board. And a tip I picked up from Sam Angelo, the Wyoming woodturner: use a center finder drill bit to make that starter pilot hole, because we really want to work hard in trying to get this thing running true. So we're going to put this in here. These are inexpensive. You get a set of them for, I don't know, 10 or 12 bucks. But it's great for wood. It's super great for metal when you're having a hard time. Okay. We're just going to do that starter hole. I'm just going to go slow. Let it find its start. We're going to go down to the countersink area, so that'll help guide the drill bit we're going to use into that hole. And that's all we need for that starter hole. So now we're going to take this out, and we're going to use the appropriate drill bit for the size screw we're going to use. Now I'm going to use a standard twist bit. I'm going to mount a 3/8 inch lag screw in this particular screw chuck. So I looked to find, here's 3/8, so I went down 2 sizes, which I think is 1/32. This is 8, 4, 12. Yes, 1/32 of an inch smaller, and I think that'll be enough to give those threads purchase. So I use a standard twist bit. We're going to drill it all the way through. I'm going to get the speed up, not too fast. A little under 600. Slowly. and take this off. And we're going to use a nut driver to drive it in from the rear. And before we, once we start it with a nut driver, before we get it all the way through, we're going to put some CA or epoxy in here and crank it down, being careful not to get it on the threads. We're just going to put it right along here so it doesn't get down into these threads here. So when it gets secured, that'll seal it. And hopefully we'll have this thing trued up. So let's see how it works. One other thing I forgot to mention I want to do before I put that nut in the back is I'm going to face this off, make sure I got it truly flat. It should be, since it's a piece of wood, but we want to get it absolutely flat. So okay, now that I've taken it off the chuck, we're going to go ahead and take this lag bolt, and using a ratchet, we're just going to slowly put this in. And when we get it almost tight, I'm trying to keep it centered as much as possible, because that'll make a difference. And then as we get it, I don't know if you can see that nut, as we get almost to the bottom, I'm going to slip in there with a long neck of CA glue. I'm just going to get this CA glue and drip some down in there, just around the neck of that nut, that lag screw head. And you don't want to put any in here because you're going to liable to get some of it in the threads of your chuck. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this up, get it nice and secure. Okay, now there's one other task we need to do, and we're going to cut the tip of this off, and I'll show you what that looks like later on a different bit, on a different screw chuck. But we're going to cut the tip off right here because we don't really need that pointed tip. It doesn't do any good. It just takes up space in that hole. We want really these threads down here, so we'll cut that tip off. And we're going to turn this on, just see how true it runs. And it really doesn't look bad, so I think that'll do well. If you're going to use one of these a lot, you might want to find a mechanical way to secure the screw. And here's how I take a large washer where the hole in the washer is just a little smaller than the head. I lay the washer or the head up against it, mark the 6 corners, and then I come after it with a file. And when I finish, I'm going to have something that looks like this. So it's going to secure this to keep it from twisting. I could have drilled holes on each side to hold this at the back of the screw chuck, but I found it easier. Just cut little notches with the rotary Dremel tool. Then use small screws to hold this in place. And this will be a lot more secure than glue will be. So you might want to consider an approach like this on a large screw chuck you're going to use quite a bit. One of the tricks of making a screw chuck is getting that screw absolutely centered. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but we want it as close as possible. One way to do that if you're putting it in a scroll chuck is once you get it in there, go ahead and then reverse chuck it by putting it in a Jacob's chuck in your headstock. Be sure to use a drawbar. And then bring up a little tailstock support. And I've got a screw here, but I've got my Nova Live Center will completely cover that and hold it. And that'll provide just a little bit extra support. And we're just going to true up this tenon just a hair. Shouldn't be off by much. Okay, now let's check it out, see how it works. Don't squeeze too tight on this with your Jacob's chuck or you'll damage those threads. So just do it very, very lightly. Now, once I get this in there, I'm going to mark these locations so I can put them back at the same spot every time. But that's running pretty true. I'm pretty happy with that. Now this screw chuck, I'm using the number 10 screw sunk in the back with a little CA. I'm going to put it on. And we're going to cut the tip of this off because the tip doesn't do any good. And we're just going to reduce it back a little bit and to keep it from snagging on things, but mostly all of it that's in there will be useful. So just going to cut it off with a Dremel tool. Won't take but a second. Okay, here's a screw chuck in action. It's got a number 10 sheet metal screw in it, and end grain does not hold threads well, so this glue block, if you will, is side grain, just like a little bowl. As is this happens to be this little knob blank. We'll just screw that on. And it's the friction between these two pieces that gives it most of the hold. But for a little additional insurance, so as not to put so much strain, I'm going to put just a little bit with this soft touch. Come up here. One revolution, make sure it's not touching. And this is how you turn a little knob. First we'll get it round. An excellent production technique or tip is to make you a little spacer that the diameter of which matches the bottom of the project you're working on, whether it's a knob or whether it's a chest mend. And then you don't have to measure this. You can actually size it against this, treating it similar to a bushing on as you're doing pens. The other possibility is when you get to the very end and you're rounding it over, if you have one slightly smaller, you can cut cleanly on the end. Note that when you use a screw chuck, sometimes you'll pull a few fibers up. So when you finish, make sure you kind of sand those few fibers, so when you do put this on your project, your furniture, you won't have any pulled up fibers interfering with a good fit. Note that the wood that you put up against here needs to be perfectly flat. Here's one, this scrap where this surface is somewhat uneven because it was left there by the actual chainsaw, so that would need to be cut off on preferably on something like a table saw. It's also not a bad idea if you're doing a production run of things, whether it's knobs or chessmen or whatever, is you run it through your table saw or band saw and make it hexagonal. It'll go a little bit smoother and then take a little less strain off when you're doing the final shaping. One other technique that helps to give you a little extra support, you can actually put a drop or two of CA on your surface that will hold. Not much that'll run everywhere, but just enough to give it a little extra hold. And that's easy enough to break loose. Okay, so I hope this episode on screw chucks was helpful for you. Might be good if you don't have a scroll chuck to give this a try. It's especially good, as I talked about, for small items like knobs and chessmen for long production type items. If you like this video, please subscribe, share it with others. Next week we're going to do a video actually using this chuck on turning small ring bowls. See you then.